Pokemon Red and Green released 25 years ago in Japan, and a few years later in September of 1998, Pokemon Red and Blue finally released in the United States. That's 23 years ago this month, and things were a lot different back then when it comes to Pokemon. This was the genesis of Pokemon, and I was fortunate enough to be a fan of Pokemon from nearly the very beginning. When I first played through Pokemon Red, I barely knew what I was doing and could have used a little bit of help. Now, I might be over 20 years late with this, but I recently got this official Pokemon Blue strategy guide by Prima, which is officially licensed by Nintendo. For some reason, they made two different guides, with one cover featuring red and in our case, a cover featuring blue version, but they're the exact same guide. Now, just a reminder, if you're new here, we like to take a look at some of these strategy guides and follow them as closely as possible to see how effective, or in most cases, funny they are, and see if they really are the best way to beat the game. If you think that's cool, you should totally like and subscribe, and also check out some of my other videos if you're interested. Now, I got my copy of this guide used, and for some reason the previous owner ripped all of the pages out and then put them in this blue binder, which I guess helps preserve the pages a bit better, and luckily for us, it brought down the value of this guide a ton, since I've got it for much less than a regular combined copy would have went for. The guide itself is only 92 pages total, which includes the Pokédex at the back and all the extra features, as well as about a 10-page introductory element, which is quite short since most guides take up about 100 pages alone just for the walkthrough itself, and then have a lot of other pages added on for the extra features, typically totaling for 250 or more pages. We're probably going to spend more time focusing on the guide itself rather than playing the game with this one, since although the guide is short, there's a lot that I want to discuss inside of it. Starting off with the very first page of the guide, it has very wholesome acknowledgements where the guide writer, Elizabeth M. Hollinger, thanks the Prima staff, Nintendo, and her Pokemon email pal Ryan for helping her come up with some Pokemon battling strategies, then congratulates him on catching all 150 pocket monsters. Hollinger wrote a couple of other strategy guides, some of which we've looked at before, like the Gold and Silver guide, but this one is structured a bit differently. It seems to focus more on her experience playing and writing the game, rather than just explaining what to do. If we go over the next page, and boy, there's no mistaking this guide was definitely printed in the late 90s. From the funky neon colors to this choice of a font, which is certainly a choice, and this iconic Ken Sugimori artwork. This page goes on to explain how Hollinger became a fan of Pokemon, since at this time, Pokemon was brand new to the Western world and nobody knew it would take off like it did outside of Japan. On this page titled How I Became a Pokemaniac, it reads, "As a writer of strategy guides, I find myself playing a lot of games, but rarely for fun and entertainment, as it often is the case when a pastime becomes a job." Gee, I wonder what that's like. But in March of 1998, my writing partner and I found a place where we could order copies of a Japanese game called Pocket Monsters. With rumors floating around about a possible American release, we picked up this mysterious little game, not knowing what we were in for. In fact, it sat unopened on my bookshelf for almost a month until I found myself on a plane from Michigan to California with nothing to do. By the return flight, I was hooked and found myself playing the game everywhere and anywhere, from my bedroom in the wee hours of the morning to the checkout line at my local grocery store. There was something about Pokemon, as it's now called, that sucked me in and kept me playing even when I was supposed to be doing other things. The rest of this page just explains some basics about Pokemon, like battling and catching, and what the overall story of Pokemon is with becoming the champion, and seeing this from the perspective of one of the very few non-Japanese people to play Pokemon before their English release is quite interesting. It then explains the version differences between Red and Blue and says to pick the version with monsters you like more. Then it only spends about 5 more pages explaining some more basics before getting into the walkthrough. I'm not going to read every little page on this guide in this video, but some parts, especially in this really early bit, are just too good, like this bit about getting started and choosing your starter Pokemon. It says, "Getting started. When you first boot up Pokemon, you'll be faced with 3 immediate choices: what to name your character, what to name your rival, and which Pokemon to start the game with. Of the 3, it is the latter question that is the most important. Once you've found Professor Oak, he'll take you back to his lab, where you can choose one Pokemon from his remaining group of 3. Your rival gets to choose next, and then the remaining Pokeball goes to Professor Oak, although he'll leave it where it is for the entire game. But which to choose? Conventional wisdom says that the Bulbasaur is your best bet. It levels up more quickly than the other two, being a grass type. It's extremely effective against the ground and water types Pokemons in the first 2 gyms. The Charmander, with its fire ability to equip strong offensive skills and 2 of the 5 hidden skills, I don't know what that means, is my personal choice, but it takes the longest to raise and is not very strong against the first 2 trainers. However, if you team it up with an electric Pokemon like a Pikachu, then you'll have a powerful team that can take on most anything in the game. The same goes for Squirtle. This character is strong against the ground Pokemon in the first gym, and can also equip the powerful water-based skill machine given to you when you defeat Misty at the Cerulean City Gym. Ultimately, you should choose the one that best suits your personality. There really is no correct choice here, so don't worry about making a mistake. Besides, you'll have the opportunity to capture up to 10 more types of Pokemon between Pallet Town and your appointment with Brock at the Pewter City Gym, and you'll want to fill out your team with some of them. It then explains catching Pokemon a bit more and says not to steal Pokemon since you'll just end up wasting a Pokeball, and then discusses the care and feeding of your Pokemon. I don't know why it says feeding here, since all it says is to regularly heal your Pokemon at the Pokemon Center with some potions as well if you're not near one, and how some first form Pokemon like Squirtle can learn the powerful Hydro Pump skill at level 42, while its evolutions learn it at a later level, and it's something you should keep in mind before evolving all your Pokemon. Every time an attack or move has come up in this guide so far, it's always referred to it as a skill, which I've noticed. I'm guessing this is because there was no official name for it at the time, and skill does make a lot of sense to call them. But the next page says how there are 36 species of Pokemon that evolve, and 24 who don't face evolution. That number seems so small compared to today where there's like 1,000 Pokemon. And to close off the introduction portion of the guide, it explains some do's and don'ts before playing. The first thing it says is to play with a friend to make catching them all easier so you can trade between games. Something that not only this guide emphasizes a lot, but catching them all in general was a heavy emphasis on Pokemon, especially during the first generation, which sort of faded away as the years progressed. Some more highlights in this part here include don't concentrate on raising just one character more than others, although I'm sure most of us are guilty of overleveling our starters as a kid. It then says to save often and match Pokemon in battle to maximize their effectiveness, and don't try to play the game from the beginning with your friend's level 70 Mewtwo. I know this intro was a bit long, and for some reason people don't like when I do long intros to these intended videos, although if you ask me, the whole point of these videos is to mainly show off the guide, and I think even the introduction parts of the guide before we actually start playing are very, very important. But with all of that out of the way, we finally reach a walk through the world of Pokemon Part 1, the quick and dirty path, which is a phrase that was also used in the Gold and Silver guide. Let's finally load up a new save of Pokemon Blue and hammer away at it to beat it exactly how Nintendo intended. Starting off, I name our characters C, name our rival Gary, and then appear in this tiny little town where I was born and raised, known as Pallet Town. I then head into the grass to meet Professor Oak, get taken back to his lab, and get the option to pick one of 3 starter Pokemon. Earlier on in the guide, we detailed how the guide went through each 3 of the starters and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and I decide on picking Squirtle since we're playing Blue version, which just seemed to make sense to me, and I named it Subscribe, then battle our rival. After laying waste to his team after he really just spammed Growls a ton of times, we head into Route 1 and learn about the dangers of long grass and the rewards of being friendly by getting this free potion from this random trainer. In Viridian City, we have to stop by the Pokemon Center, then stop by the Pokemart to pick up the parcel for Professor Oak, and the guide makes note about how it's a shame that they're out of potions. The guide also says how Professor Oak's usual delivery boy is sick and we have to deliver the parcel ourselves to him and get the Pokedex in exchange, then visit Gary's sister to get the town map because I don't know, maybe his sister has a crush on you or something. When we return to Viridian City, the guide wants us to go west to Route 22 with some Pokeballs and catch a Pokemon for this upcoming rival fight. I caught a Spearow, which I named Bird, and then get both of our Pokemon to level 9 as the guide recommended for this rival fight, since both of our rivals' Pokemon include a level 9 Pidgey and a level 8 default Pokemon, in this case being Bulbasaur. The guide then mentions the Viridian City Gym and the gym leader Giovanni, although we can't battle him just yet since he is the 8th gym leader. People might not realize this or even remember this since these games are so old, but the game never tells you that Giovanni is the gym leader until you go into the gym and actually see him for yourself. And although I don't personally remember experiencing this as a kid, I'm sure it could have been quite the shock for somebody playing this for the first time to see that the head of Team Rocket is actually a gym leader as well. We'll return to fight him much later on, and the guide then shows Route 2, although we can't access most of it until we get the skill HM for Cut later. So for now, we have to go through the Viridian Forest after defeating our rival in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. The first thing the guide has in Viridian Forest is this Trainer's Talk, which I've noticed at the start of a lot of new sections for this guide, and it says how the forest has a lot of bug types, and to try to use a fire Pokemon like Charmander, or flight Pokemon like Spearow or Pidgey to get the best results. I have never heard of flying type Pokemon referred to as flight Pokemon before. Usually if somebody refers to flying type Pokemon as something else, it's typically bird Pokemon, as apparently they were originally intended to be called that. And at this point I also realized that the guide doesn't have any type matchup chart anywhere like most guides do, and just tell us what Pokemon are super effective against other types when we encounter them. Spearow makes this forest pretty easy though, since the guide does note how flying types are good against bug types. And we do get a bit lucky by finding a Pikachu on our way through, which I caught, and the guide suggested we catch a Pikachu since Pikachu is good against water and flight Pokemon. In Pewter City, there really isn't anything to do here that important until we battle the gym leader Brock. The guide notes how up until now we've only fought tiny bug, bird, and rodent Pokemon, and I'll bet they've been pretty easy to defeat. Well, that's about to change. Brock's gym is devoted to the art of raising rock and ground Pokemon. These chunks of stone and precious gems are hard to defeat unless you have a powerful water or grass Pokemon on your side. It then said out if you chose Charmander as your starter to make sure it's a well-seasoned warrior by now, and accompany it by a bug Pokemon that can help out if assistance is needed. Bug types are still weak to rock, and I guess there really isn't any other options, that's why the guide recommended bug. And since we do have a strong water type Pokemon in our starter Pokemon Squirtle, we're able to hammer away at Brock for the very first gym badge by just spamming Bubble. One thing I did notice at the back of the guide that I quickly want to mention that I do think is important is it does have a section that shows all of the moves, or skills in this case, with a little description about them as well as their accuracy and their hit power. That might seem like it's not that important, but in Red and Blue it doesn't tell you the accuracy or the power of the moves in-game, so having this is actually quite useful. After that fierce battle with Brock though, it's time to relax in a few friendly bouts with trainers on this road, being Route 3, then head over to Mount Moon and get ready to do some spelunking. On our journey through Route 3, Squirtle evolves into Wartortle, and the guide says how we should catch the rare Pokemon Jigglypuff if you're into magical or mysterious Pokemon. I'm not really sure what's so magical or mysterious about Jigglypuff, but I caught one to name it H-Box, then make it into the Pokemon Center on this route where we meet a gentleman selling Magikarps. This guide says to save our money and not buy the Magikarp, since although he'll make it sound like a good deal, don't be fooled. We can catch a Magikarp later on when we get to Vermilion City and get a fishing rod. For Mount Moon, the guide here has a map for us to follow and mentions how Team Rocket has infiltrated this area to steal some rare fossils that are being excavated at the bottom. It then warns us of some of the trainers' Pokemon around this area, and then tells us a bit about the fossils once we reach them at the end. We get the option to choose one of these fossils, and I choose the Helix fossil because it was just the one right in front of me, and then make it into Route 4. On this route, the guide says to pick up the TM for Whirlwind and scour the grass for our first unique Pokemon, being Sandshrew, which is the blue version exclusive. I caught one named it Dig Dug after that Namco game that I used to love when I was little, and then make it into Cerulean City. The first thing the guide says to do here is Trader Alert, telling us about this trainer here who will trade us a rare Jinx for a Poliwhirl. We can't get a Poliwhirl just yet, but the guide tells us to file this information away, so I guess I'll do that. and then it wants us to take on Misty's gym. Now I know it would make more sense to go up north and battle the trainers on the Nugget Bridge and the surrounding area to get some extra EXP and levels, but the guide says to do the gym fight first, so I guess we have to do that. For Misty's gym, the guide says, quote, "She's cute, she's bubbly, and she's always wearing a bathing suit. She's Misty, and she raises Pokemon of the water variety." It then suggests a strong electric or grass type Pokemon for this gym, and to be around level 25, which is a bit high since her ace Pokemon is only 21. So I get Pikachu to 25 since it's the recommended type of electric, and all of our other Pokemon to around 20 or so, and get through Misty pretty quickly with our electric Pokemon. We can now go through the Nugget Bridge where we are warned about a level 18 Mankey that some trainer has, and get a nugget as a reward from this Team Rocket guy who tries to recruit us. I then teach the Bubble Beam TM we got as a reward for beating Misty to War Turtle since the guide said it would be good against some of the hikers on this route near Bill's house. And finally make it to his house to help him out and get the SS and ticket as a reward. On our way out of the city, we encounter this Team Rocket grunt who is a thief and get the Dig TM for defeating him after he ransacked this house. Kind of weird how we're taking this TM after he blatantly just stole it from somebody. And then we proceed south and pass through the daycare where I drop off Jigglypuff since I'm not really using it, and then go through the underground tunnel and make it to Route 6. The guide warns us about a level 20 Butterfree on this route because it can put us to sleep and to bring awakenings, so I brought some awakenings which do come in clutch since that Butterfree does put us to sleep, and finally make it into Vermilion City. The guide notes how here Pokemon and Pokemaniacs are celebrated by all. If you don't believe me, pay a visit to the Pokemon fan club. The first thing we do here though is get a hand-me-down fishing rod from this fisherman, and the guide notes how this fisherman has two other brothers who also give out rods, then visit the Pokemon fan club to get a bike voucher, and then party on the SS Anne. The gang of trainers on the SS Anne are a motley bunch ranging from distinguished gentlemen and lasses to coarse fishermen and sailors. I'm also noticing the guide tends to like the word motley a lot, but we then have to battle our rival on the SS Anne and beat him easily, and the guide notes how if we beat our rival easily, that we're doing a good job. After that, we get to help the captain with his seasickness and get the skill HM for cut as a reward, so we can now access Lieutenant Surge's gym. The guide says how Lieutenant Surge is the leader of an order of Pokemon trainers dedicated to electric Pokemon, which sounds rather culty to me, and how only ground-type Pokemon have an affinity for electric-type Pokemon. And since we have a Sandshrew that recently evolved into Sandslash, I teach it Dig, which the guide also suggests for this gym, and defeat Lieutenant Surge in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. The guide now mentions the Diglett's Cave after defeating Lieutenant Surge and getting the 3rd gym badge, which would have been pretty helpful to visit before battling Lieutenant Surge, as you can catch a Diglett here, which is a strong ground-type Pokemon. But I just go across Diglett Cave and make it to the other side of Route 2 that we can now access in order to get the HM for Flash, which the guide did mention much earlier on in the guide. The guide then tells us to go to Route 9 and doesn't really say much about it until we reach the entrance to the rock tunnel. It tells us to heal up here because you have no idea what lies inside, making the rock tunnel sound a lot more ominous than it actually is. And since we have the Flash skill HM, I teach it to Pikachu to illuminate the cave. When we exit the cave, we appear in Lavender Town, a place where dead Pokemon are laid to rest, and the guide says how this town is buzzing about some recent hauntings in the town. We can't really do much here right now and have to return a little bit later. So we go on the next route where we see trainers with toxic pollutants like coughing, a rather interesting thing to call a coughing, and then finally arrive in Celadon City. First, we have a rare opportunity to get this free Eevee, a great Pokemon to have. Then we buy a drink at the department store for later to give to one of the guards. Then visit the nearby restaurant where the guide says how we can see the effect the Game Corner has on its citizens, as there's one guy who even gives up his coin purse too after losing everything. I know this game was made at a much different time, and it's really interesting to see how there's a lot of these weird elements for a kid's game, as we just exited Lavender Town, a town with dead Pokemon, and then encountered a gambling addict in the span of like 10 minutes. Our next task though is to challenge Erica in her grass type gym to get the 4th gym badge, and the guide says how almost any Pokemon works well against her except for water, electric, and ground types. It specifically recommends Pokemon of the Flame variety, which I don't have, and our only Pokemon that fits this bill is Bird, which recently evolved into Fearow and is coincidentally super effective against Grass-type Pokemon, although the guide didn't say anything about flying types, or should I say flight types being good here. So I just head in and use Fearow for this battle. I hammer away with some pecks, and after getting paralyzed and poisoned by some of the junior trainers and even Erica herself, we finally defeat Erica to receive the pretty rainbow badge, as the guide puts it. With the 4th gym badge in our badge case, the guide tells us to go into the game corner next, which is Team Rocket's secret hideout. The guide has an easy to follow map for this dungeon, then explains these propulsion pads, which are these funny little spinny pads, and tells us, quote, "Don't be afraid of roughing them up," talking about all of the rocket grunts we battle here. It tells us to talk to each rocket after we beat them because one of them ends up dropping the lift key, which we need to progress through this area. And seeing as this is a pretty easy thing to miss if you're not looking for it, it's good to see that the guide is clearing it up. After collecting the lift key, we can access Giovanni's office, where we battle his team of mostly rock and ground monsters, as the guide put it. The guide doesn't detail Giovanni's full team, and it also hasn't done that for any of the Giovanni fights so far, and it hasn't done that for any of the rival fights either. But once we defeat Giovanni, we get the Sylph Scope that we can use later on during our return trip to Lavender Town. Before we do that, I take some time to look at the back of the guide to learn more about this Eevee we just got recently, since the guide mentioned earlier how it can evolve through a different method. In the back of the guide in the Pokedex section, it lists the 3 evolutions and says how they evolve with the 3 evolutionary stones in this game, and since I don't have a flame type Pokemon yet, as the guide calls them, I get the Fire Stone to evolve our Eevee into a Flareon. I then check Gyarados back here as well, a flying type Pokemon, to see that it correctly listed as part flying type and not flight type, so I don't know why the guide is using flight type sometimes and flying other times, and then fire type sometimes and flame type sometimes. We then return to Lavender Town, and the guide says how the ghost Pokemon here in the Pokemon Tower will seem difficult until you find out which Pokemon do best against them. I don't know why it doesn't just tell me which Pokemon do well against them and it just has us guess. And it also doesn't tell us anything about the rival battle in this area, so I just go through this area with our Wartortle until it finally evolves into Blastoise. Once we make it to the top and reveal the Marowak with the Sylph Scope we send it to the afterlife, which the guide calls an act of compassion that will send her spirit to rest at last. I thought that was a little bit weird, and after defeating the Rocket Grunts at the top, which the guide also didn't mention for some reason, we meet Mr. Fuji and get the Poke Flute, allowing us to wake up some sleeping Snorlaxes blocking our way. I then decide to check up on that Jigglypuff we left in the daycare and take it out, then return to Saffron City. The next page shows Saffron City, so after handing the guard the drink, we head in, and the guide mentions how Saffron City is nestled in the heart of Pokemon Country. I'm pointing this out because this region was never officially referred to as Kanto in the English versions of Red and Blue, so nobody really knew what to call it, especially at the time. The first task the guide discusses in this city is the Silphco, but says we should explore the city a bit first, so I check out the Splinter Gym, aka the Fighting Dojo, and get a Hitmonchan as our prize, then visit Mr. Psychic for the Psychic TM, and then take on the Silphco, which is infiltrated by Team Rocket. The guide has a full list for this area too, making getting through it pretty easily, and this time it references the rival fight and has a caption of "Didn't I just fight you?" although it didn't mention the previous fight we had with him in Lavender Town. The guide also does list how we can find a Lapras in this building, but doesn't say exactly how to get it. I actually end up losing the first rival fight too, so I level up the team a little bit and teach Blastoise the Ice Beam TM we got from the girl on the Celadon City department store. So when I challenge our rival for a second time, we lay waste to his team, and after the rival fight, I just go up to the top of the building to battle Giovanni and save the Silphco president. We get the Master Ball as a reward for defeating Giovanni, and the guide notes how it's best to save the Master Ball for Mewtwo later on in the game. That's pretty much the last of Team Rocket for the game, so now we can focus solely on becoming the champion. Here the guide lists Sabrina as the 5th gym leader, although if you check your trainer card, it shows her as the 6th gym leader. Now you could technically battle her now if you wanted to, although you're supposed to battle her later, and since the guide tells us to battle her now and before Koga, the actual 5th gym leader, I just battle Sabrina 5th. The guide doesn't really say too much about how to beat her, besides that her psychic Pokemon are easily beaten by bugs and their ghostly friends. Since we have neither of those Pokemon types, I just brute force through this fight with our Fearow, since it recently learned Drill Peck, a very strong move, especially in this generation. Now, I've played through Red and Blue a ton before in the past, although it has been a little while since I've last played Red and Blue, but I've never used a Fearow before, which is part of the reason why I like doing these type of runs so much. It did directly suggest we catch a Pokemon on a route that happened to be a Spearow, which I also happened to encounter, and I probably would have never done this unless I was following the guide exactly. We are able to defeat Sabrina though, getting the 5th, or maybe 6th, gym badge. After completing the events in Saffron City, the next page shows Route 12, which is the route under Lavender Town, so I head over there where I try to catch the Snorlax blocking our way, but fail. The guide notes how we should use Ultra Balls to catch Snorlax if we made it to Fuchsia City before this, but since the guide didn't tell us to go to Fuchsia City yet, I don't have Ultra Balls yet, so we just have to rely on using Super Balls, as the guide puts it, which are the direct Japanese translation for Great Balls. After failing to catch it and getting an upgraded fishing rod on this route, we make it to the gate that leads into Fuchsia City, but the next page details the cycling road, so instead of going right into Fuchsia City, we have to go back to Celadon City to access Cycling Road from the top. It would make more sense to go to Fuchsia City just from Cycling Road in general, but either way, once we make it back to the other side, I pick up the skill HM for Fly near here so we can teach it to Bird, and then the guide says how unfortunately you won't be able to ride fast enough to escape the bikers and cue balls that have staked out spots in the cycling road. And out of curiosity, I just wanted to see how many I could avoid, and I was able to avoid all but 2 of them, and then finally make it into the gate leading into Fuchsia City. In the gate, the guide notes how there is a person here that is willing to trade his Lickitung for a lesser Slowbro, which I thought was funny because Slowbro is actually a decent Pokemon. I don't know why the guide called it a lesser Slowbro. And then make it into Fuchsia City, which is at the southernmost part of the main Pokemon continent. The first thing it tells us to do here is challenge Koga, the apparent 6th gym leader in this region, in his gym with invisible walls. It then says how if we have a Super Game Boy, we can see these invisible walls a bit easier, and suggests we use offensive fighters and full heals for Koga's poisonous team. Since we now know that Poison is weak to ground thanks to all of the Rocket Grunts and their Poison-type Pokemon, I use Dig Dug here to spam Dig against Koga's team, and this works out really well, allowing us to defeat Koga and get our 6th gym badge. From here, we have to explore the rest of Fuchsia City, mainly just the Safari Zone. It's home to some rare Pokemon, so I catch a couple along the way, and follow the map in order to get the Gold Teeth, which we later exchange for the Strength HM, and end up getting a prize here, which is the HM for Surf. With the Surf HM at our disposal, we can now surf through and into Cinnabar Island, and the guide has us go through Fuchsia City and through the Seafoam Islands to access it first. The guide has taken us on a slightly different route through Kanto than I would have personally taken if I was just playing this game normally, and when we access the Seafoam Islands, it wants us to go through it to catch the legendary Pokemon Articuno. It suggests we carry at least 50 Ultra Balls to try and catch Articuno, but I only had enough money for 47, so I guess we'll just go through with that, and then I follow the map that leads to Articuno. In the battle against Articuno, I paralyze it and whittle away at its HP, and once it has barely any HP and is paralyzed, I throw Ultra Balls, but they all end up missing. Throwing Pokeballs in this game works a bit differently than modern Pokemon games, and you can miss a lot. And we missed so much, and Articuno broke through paralysis so much that it actually ended up wiping our entire team. This means we can't catch Articuno, unfortunately, and now we have no other choice but to keep going on and going to Cinnabar Island, which is a small island with a few things for us to do. We can revive our fossils at the lab if we want to, then go into the Pokemon house, as the guide puts it, to find the key to enter the 7th gym. The guide has a walkthrough for this too, and mentions how the key is in the basement of the Pokemon house, although it's actually called the Pokemon Mansion. I don't know why it's calling it the Pokemon house, but there's no stairs to go to the basement. It then says how the only way down is by jumping from the 2nd floor, so after shattering our ankles, we make it down there to get the key and open up Blaine's gym. For Blaine's flame Pokemon, the guide suggests water, rock, or ground type Pokemon. We have Blastoise and I rely on using it for most of the gym, Although the guide doesn't say anything about the gym puzzle here, which is a series of questions we can answer in order to skip the junior trainers. Since it made no mention of this, I just battle all of the junior trainers and then end up battling Blaine, who we defeat rather quickly with Blastoise. And the guide says how defeating him increases your Pokemon's special skills. I don't really know what that means. And how we get the Fire Blast skill TM, which might come in handy for the Elite Four pretty soon. From here we can immediately challenge Giovanni. And we have to flip back about 40 or so pages to see this gym battle in detail, because the guide first detailed Giovanni's gym when we first entered Viridian City very early on in the game. This is really the guide's only real instance of requiring us to flip back and forth, which is nice and a common problem for some other guides that I've seen, as flipping back and forth can get a bit confusing. And even though he is the final gym leader, the guide only has a small paragraph about this fight. It tells us to have our best water, grass, or ice type, so I use Blastoise again here, and it also says to be at about level 50 to match his ace Pokemon, which is also level 50. Blastoise makes this gym very easy, much like it did against Blaine's gym previously, giving us the final gym badge as well as TM27, the awesome skill for Fissure. We have to go through Route 22 now, and not him again, we have another rival fight here as the guide says. The guide also says this is a good test for the Elite Four, and we beat him first try, so I guess we passed that test, then go through Route 23 and into the Victory Road. There's a map here to help us go through here, but also a legendary Pokemon that we can catch in the Victory Road. The guide shows us how to get to the legendary flame Pokemon named Moltres. I thought that this was a one-time mistake, but it keeps calling Moltres Moltos in this section, except for in the very back Pokedex section where it correctly calls Moltos Moltres. We use the same technique used to battle Articuno to try and catch it, but this time we actually do catch the Moltres, which I of course name Moltos. When we make it out and into the Indigo Plateau, I buy some items for our upcoming fights and teach some TMs to the team. To recap our team, we have our starter Pokemon, Subscribe the Blastoise, then Pikachu, Sandslash, Fearow, Moltos, and a very underleveled Flareon that I've barely used. Our first fight is against the water expert Lorelei, and the guide says how this is probably the easiest. A few of my Pokemon do end up fainting here, although Pikachu works pretty well type trumping her water types, giving us the victory, but it was a little bit harder than I anticipated. Second up is Bruno, and the guide says how his team isn't as intimidating as they think. So I attack them with water and fight skills to make them toast like the guide says, then proceed to fight Agatha. The guide says how fighting ghost types is no fun at all, although her team is mostly grounded poison types as well, so I just rely on using Sandslash with Dig for most of this fight. These fights are all going by pretty quickly, and the guide only has a small paragraph for each, while a lot of other guides tend to detail this a bit more since it is the final fights of the game. Fourth up is Lance and his Dragon type team. The guide mentions how Dragon types are pretty rare in this game since there's really only one in Red and Blue, and we do luckily have an Ice move on Blastoise and Ice Beam like the guide suggested. It also says how any final form Pokemon with the Hyper Beam skill would be good too, but we can't exactly go back to get Hyper Beam right now since we're in the middle of the Elite Four, so I just spam Ice Beams for most of his team, then stall out his Gyarados with Thunder Waves and Flashes from Pikachu because I ran out of Thunderbolt PP. After knocking him out with a few of our other Pokemon, all that's left now is the champion, which is our rival, Gary. It doesn't really say too much here except how he has representatives from all major types and what other Pokemon he will have depending on which of the 3 starters you pick since his team does vary, and how we'll have a troop of Pokemon that can counter them. Luckily, our troop of Pokemon does counter our rival's team pretty well, as Sandslash and Blastoise take out most of his team. Then on his final Pokemon, which is his starter Pokemon Venusaur, I send out Blastoise, which was our starter, to type Trumpet with Ice Beams and have a throwback to our very first rival fight back in Pallet Town where we both only had our starters. We end up two-shotting with Ice Beam, making us the champion and beating Pokemon Red and Blue how Nintendo intended, except for one small thing we have to do, which is to catch Mewtwo as the guide details on the following page, and has sort of been building up to ever since we first got the Master Ball. I just go right into the unknown dungeon and go straight to Mewtwo and just chuck the Master Ball at it to make it easier, which the guide recommended. I know this really isn't part of the main game as the credits did roll after we became the champion, but I've always seen catching Mewtwo as kind of the final boss of Red and Blue, so to say, and if I didn't include it here, I'm sure people would have been asking about it, so here it is. Overall though, this playthrough of Pokemon Blue was a ton of fun for me. It was a nice bit of nostalgia for me since there's no mistaking this guide was from the late 90s, and this is probably the closest I have ever gotten to experiencing Pokemon for the first time ever again, as while I have played through Red and Blue a ton, I didn't really know what the guide was gonna say, how it was gonna say it, and what it was gonna make me do, which made it a very fun experience. The guide itself was pretty good as well, considering it was the very first ever Pokemon guide made, and it was also made before Pokemon was really popular outside of Japan. There was only some minor mistakes that it had, like calling attacks skills and mixing up some type names in that, which is understandable since Pokemon was very new at the time. And the only real mistake was calling Moltres Moltos, which was pretty funny. I also like how the guide writers inputted their own experiences while first playing through Pokemon, especially in the introductory part of this guide, since no other guides we've looked at have done that before. This has been by far one of my favorite guides we've looked at so far, and I'm glad that I got it when I did. It was the shortest guide we've looked at, but it was still packed with key information, and every page had something pretty cool on it. Since this year is Pokemon's 25th anniversary and September is the month that Red and Blue were first released in the United States, I couldn't think of a better Nintendo video to do for this month, since I like to do these videos once a month if you didn't know by now. But I still upload every Saturday, so if you enjoy these videos, you'll probably like my other videos as well. You should also consider subscribing so you don't miss any of those videos, and hammer away at that like button to help this video reach more people. With all that out of the way, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I will see you all next time, and bye bye.